Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to Orange Weekly. It's presented by Krause Health, and we are on a bunch of different places today. There may be a couple of you watching on a couple of our Facebook pages saying, whoa, what's happening right now? Well, let me tell you what's happening right now. We like to do this show live here on the interwebs every Thursday, about 1 o'clock or so. So as we speak, we are live on the Syracuse Orange football Facebook page. I'm going to get some football notes in for you guys and you football fans out there. Certainly live on the Syracuse Orange basketball Facebook page with the big Duke matchup approaching. Syracuse coming off a win over Clemson on Tuesday night. We are live on the CNY Lacrosse page, too. A lot of you are like, wow, I can't even remember liking this Facebook page. Well, here we are, because lacrosse fans, we got you covered. We're going to be talking some lax going forward here. Season's still a couple weeks away for both Syracuse men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse, but we want to get that conversation going. A couple news and notes on that front. We're live on Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube as well. So just so you guys know, we do this live every Thursday on these channels. If you missed the show, it archives on YouTube. You can watch that. We put up a post on syracuse.com. We'll fire it off on our social media channels. If you're watching on Facebook right now, it automatically archives there. So we're live here on Thursdays, and if you do join us live, hop in the comments section. Ask us some questions, comments, just what you think about Syracuse sports right now. We just kind of talk about the latest and the greatest going on in the Syracuse sports universe. Mike Waters of syracuse.com is going to join us shortly to talk some Syracuse hoops and the use of the bench and Duke coming up and what it's going to take for this team to keep fighting, scratching, and clawing here to stay in the race. I mean, they're 9-9 right now. The NCAA tournament still seems way over the horizon for this team. But the last thing you can do is count out Syracuse basketball, right? They'll just find a way, right? But if they're going to find a way, they've got to figure out a way to go on a sustained winning streak. It was nice to see how they played Tuesday night. Fun basketball game Tuesday night, one way or the other. But this is a team that still has to find a way to sustain wins, go on winning streaks, and that really comes down to defense, right? So we'll talk to Mike about that, and let's just give Mike the Pulitzer right now. Our friend and colleague, Donna DeToda, won the National Sports Media Association New York Sports Writer of the Year Award. Shout out to Donna for that. First woman in New York State to win that award, so long overdue, first of all. And second of all, somebody who should win that award every year. Props to Donna. I'll tell you what, though, I think Mike is coming for the Pulitzer because he wrote a story this week that I would encourage you to write, and we'll talk to read, and we'll talk to Mike about it coming up too. You ever wonder how many people actually cash in those Taco Bell tickets? You know, Syracuse basketball scores 70 points, you get a free taco. I've always wondered, like, how many people actually do that? And I challenged Mike on Twitter. I said, I have a Mike's Mailbox question, the famous and terrific Mike's Mailbag segment that he does. I said, I got a Mike's Mailbox question. How many people actually go grab those tacos? Mike being Mike, he found the answer. So we'll talk to him about that coming up here shortly. Have some fun, but certainly a lot of hoops on the table as well. So let's start there, and I'll bring in Mike here shortly. Tuesday was just a fun game. And what we have not seen a lot of, honestly, it depends on your version of fun, I guess. If you're a Syracuse fan and they played that stretch of games where they were losing, you know, Wake Forest goes to overtime, couldn't get the inbounds play in. You know, Miami, they blow an 18-point lead. There's a pattern there. The last 5 losses Syracuse has had have been decided by 5 points or less. So it might be a little stressful being a Syracuse basketball fan. If you've got those cardiac cues t-shirts, right, they come in handy for this team. So it can be a little stressful. And unfortunately for Syracuse, they found ways to lose a lot of those close games. You can go back to the Georgetown game, right? But when Syracuse wins, there's enough of a exhale. There's enough of, you know, the score. Teams can stay in it. I mean, that Clemson game, they were within 3 at several points in the second half. The final score was 91-78. But the games that Syracuse wins, they seem to be just ahead enough, just comfortable enough that it's not so stressful. And Tuesday night was one of their more consistent wire-to-wire games where the offense was humming. Joe Girard, you know, it's one of two things with Joe. He's either running the offense or he is the offense, right? He's an offensive-minded point guard. That's something that, you know, Jim Boeheim has given him the green light to do. He's hitting early. Buddy Boeheim is finding just enough space to hit threes. He scores 23 points. Jesse Edwards and the emergence of him in the middle has been something to watch this year. And that toe-to-toe matchup he had with PJ Hall from Clemson was something to behold. And it was fun to watch. PJ Hall ends up with 19 points and 11 rebounds. Jesse had 15 points, 11 rebounds. His first double-double of the year. I was surprised to see that. It felt like he had a couple more. But his first double-double of the year, 4 block shots. And it's how Jesse's playing right now. He's tenacious. He's going after it. He's aggressive. Not only in the offensive end, you want him to balance out those fouls as best as can be. And he has fouled out of, 6 of his last 7 games. But as long as he kind of spreads them out throughout the game, you're fouling out with 2 minutes to go and you're up by 12. Doesn't matter, right? But you can't be leaving a game with 9 minutes to go like you did in a recent game. So that was big. But the big story to me was the bench. Bourama Sidibe, where you been, right? I frankly forgot that dude was on the team. And then Bourama is back. He's productive, 2 minutes, scores a basket. It was just great to see him back out there. Can he be a factor for this team going forward, right? That was big. Symir Torrance in that 3-guard lineup. Game prior to that against Florida State, they went to it because they had to. In this game, it felt like they went to it just because they could, and it worked. Benny Williams has been a big topic of discussion. He was huge off the bench, right? So as we're discussing this, let's bring him in. Mike Waters is here, folks. We're live on the internet, Michael, and we just got things going talking about some Syracuse hoops and the bench. It's been a big topic of discussion with Syracuse fans. It's not a chemistry lab, but boy, we saw a lineup and we saw a mixture off the bench we don't typically see from Jim Boeheim on Tuesday. So in what was a fun game to watch, a high-scoring game, a game Syracuse obviously needed to win to get back to 500, even with all those guys that put up a bunch of points, I thought the biggest thing that came out of that game, Mike, and I wonder if you agree, was, sprinkling in some players off the bench that we hadn't seen and just the use of the bench overall.
Yeah, the usage of the bench was interesting on Tuesday night against Clemson. We saw the small lineup again a little bit with Symir entering the game, but instead of Buddy or Joe coming out, but Buddy slid to the 3. Interesting look. I think it worked in part because Clemson had gone small. So, you were able to match up fairly well still on offense, and you weren't getting killed by a huge team up front. I don't think you're going to see that 3-guard lineup much on Saturday against Duke, which is going to have a much bigger front court. But it's interesting. At least it's another tool in the arsenal for Syracuse. And perhaps it is a lineup that you can go to for answers when you're seeing pressure, or when you do go up against a team that, like you, has 3 smaller perimeter guys. There's several teams in the league that will use that kind of look. So somewhat encouraging that Bourama Sidibe was able to come in. Now we'll have to see. With Bourama over the last couple years, it's always been like, how does he feel the day later or 2 days later? How does he react to that time on the court? He's a guy, I told you, I don't know if we'll see the small lineup against Duke because of their size. It might be much more important as to whether Bourama can go again.
Could be good timing.
With guys like Mark Williams and Paolo Banchero and guys like that, to combat those bigs, you have to be prepared in case Jesse Edwards is in early foul trouble again. So not just having Frank Anselm ready, but maybe it would be nice if Bourama can give him some minutes on Saturday too.
Mike, this Duke matchup has been so fun to watch ever since Syracuse and Duke collided, once or twice a year, depending on the schedule since joining the ACC. You go back to that CJ Fair non-call and just on from there, Jim Boeheim tossing his coat and the record crowds at the Dome, John Gillen's buzzer beater. It just feels like it's not a rivalry in a traditional sense, but it's a rivalry in a modern sense. And you've got the 2 last matchups in the regular season between Jim Boeheim and Mike Krzyzewski, Cameron Indoor, the whole thing. But what about this Duke team? They're not going to be in a good mood. They lost to Florida State earlier this week, I should say. Miami is a team that clipped Duke. So while Duke is Duke and they're a top 5-6 team, and you mentioned Banchero and all the great players they have, a couple of teams have clipped them here. You can beat Duke if you push all the right buttons. So what did Miami and Florida State do to get to Duke? And does Syracuse have the same formula, if you will, in a potential upset.
Well, you just hit on it. It really doesn't matter much what Miami and Florida State did because they don't play any way, shape, or form like Syracuse plays. Syracuse is going to play the zone. Unlike Florida State, they're not going to pressure. So you're like, okay, well, with Syracuse and what you do, what can you do to maybe be the next team that surprises Duke like Miami and Florida State did? And, you look at the way Duke scores. I mean, for adjusted offensive efficiency and, actual field goal percentage, you can tell I've been on KenPom.com already today, throwing out these terms.
All the analytics.
Duke's amongst one of the top teams in the country in those sort of offensive stats, but they don't rely on the three very heavily. Their usage of the three-pointer is way below the national average. They don't get a lot of their points, the contribution from the three-pointer. So if you're Syracuse, you're like, well, we've been worried all year about extending and getting out and getting in people's faces. And maybe this is the game where, you know what? We're going to pack it in. We're going to tell Duke, listen, if you want to shoot from out there, we're okay with that. As long as you're not getting it inside the Boncaro and Williams and Wendell Moore and all these other guys who love to work in the lane. And listen, if A.J. Griffin, the younger brother of former Syracuse Orangeman Alan Griffin, by the way, if he makes threes and beats you, you know what? We tip your hat. But if Duke's able to get inside consistently and score in there, which is what they like to do, I don't know. I don't see how Syracuse wins that matchup because in addition to, Duke scoring inside, the more it gets inside, well, Jesse Edwards and Jimmy Boeheim and Cole Swider are probably all going to be running into foul trouble, and that would not be a good thing for Syracuse. I think you pack it in and see if Duke can have a good three-point shooting day. And if they do, well, you know what? That's how you took your shot.
Well, doesn't it feel like the 1-1-3 makes a little bit more of a presence? They've used it a bunch this year. It makes sense that they would use it. As you said, Mike, they don't pressure. They don't play man-to-man, obviously. So I feel like we could see that. Maybe Jim's a little more liberal, getting Frank in there, getting John Bull in there if he just needs size. Just the foul situation is going to determine that, of course. But I don't know. I've heard the story before about teams that don't shoot threes and then they play Syracuse and it just bombs away, right? And Florida State the other night. But you're right. Duke's bread is buttered in that paint, and when they're rolling, you can see why. I mean, Duke's Duke, obviously, but this particular Duke team, when they're rolling, they are tough to stop, and you have to do what Miami or Florida State did to take them down. But I don't know. I feel like there's just something in the air when these two teams play. They're typically high-scoring games. They're typically up and down the floor type of games. When Syracuse and Duke play, Mike, they just play basketball. It's not some teams you run into in the ACC that grind it, slow it down, whatever the case may be. But with Syracuse's inability to consistently make stops, I mean, it's all going to come down to, what they can carry over from Tuesday in a completely different game. I understand that, but it's hitting from the three-point line. Can Girard get going offensively? I thought that was a big spark for this team. But, as you kind of look at it from the Syracuse angle, is it just that simple? It's just, score on every possession you can and just hold on tight?
Yeah, they are going to have to score. Syracuse, even like when you see them go up against a team like Clemson, which isn't necessarily an offensive juggernaut, they allowed 78 points. It's only because they scored 91 that game seemed like it was in hand coming down the stretch there. Duke's going to get after you. They're going to pressure. They like to overplay the passes to the wings. That's going to make life tough for Buddy Boeheim. But who else can score then? Well, if they're overplaying guys like that, Jesse Edwards is a guy. If he's not in foul trouble early and they can go to him, he might be able to get some of Duke's bigs into foul trouble. Make the Mark Williams kid work. I know that big 7'1" sophomore is one of the top shot blockers in the country, but can he block a hook shot from Jesse Edwards? I'd like to see him try. Let's go in there. And if they're overplaying, who else has a little bit of the ability to score himself by, working the ball inside is Jimmy Boeheim.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have blow-by ability. He's not going to just, put the ball on the floor and go. But he's got all those little unorthodox moves and that left-handed, shot. But he's ambidextrous enough to turn around and go with the right hand. This would be an interesting day to see who Jimmy Boeheim's going to be matched up against. Is it going to be Boncaro? Might be. That could be a tough matchup. But if it's not Boncaro, I could see Jimmy scoring in and around there. And if not, if Boncaro is on Jimmy, then who's on Cole Swider? Because with all these overplays, you got to hopefully get a shooter open.
Yeah, Jimmy had the quietest double-double ever the other night, right? Because he had Buddy with 25 and Gerard with 23 and Jesse's battle with P.J. Hall. And meanwhile, there's Jimmy Boeheim, 13 points, 10 rebounds. And Mike, our colleague, the award-winning Donna DeToda, wrote about rebounding, and 6 straight games, all ACC games. Syracuse has out-rebounded its opponent, and it's one thing when it's a couple, but they forcefully out-rebounded Clemson. I would be surprised if they keep that streak going against Duke, but at least they are rebounding better. And there's certain aspects of this team that maybe you don't expect that they're excelling at that, certainly they got to continue to do that. But, that's what people have speculated about. Look, Jimmy Boeheim has been as consistent a player on this team as anybody, but can he match up with a true physically gifted team that's got some bigs and has some guys on the Duke level? So I'll be as curious as anybody to see that. And Jimmy's first game at Cameron as a member of the Orange. Mike, before we do let you go, though, speaking of award-winning, I have informed the Pulitzer Committee that the Taco Bell story is up, and I have nominated you for it. I challenged you on social media. I wanted to know how many people actually went and took that ticket stub, or however they cash it in. I think they just have to basically say, hey, Syracuse scored 70. Give me a taco. And you found out just how many people do that. Now, I don't want you to give it away. I want people to read the story. But okay. I want you to tell the people here on Orange Weekly just, taking on that challenge and what that story was like to write and how you got to the answer that we were seeking on that.
It really wasn't as hard as you would think. I first of all, I called a couple Taco Bells. And finally, one store manager at one location said the person you need to talk to is such and such in our corporate headquarters. And I was thinking at first, corporate headquarters. I mean, where's Taco Bell's corporate headquarters?
Right,
I don't know. Louisville, Kentucky, San Antonio, Texas. I thought this isn't going to work. Well, no. I find out that the Taco Bells locally they're owned by a local organization, company. Started by a local guy. So headquarters is actually right out off 7th North Street.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was perfect. And I tell you what, the person I talked to there, she was wonderful. Name's Jessica Woodburn. She's in the story. She had the numbers at her fingertips. And because she had been at the company 17 years herself, she had a lot of historical, information and stuff, and could say, well, back 3-4 years ago, this is how many people were coming, and this is how many people are coming now. And yes, it was this many years ago when we lowered it from 75 to 70. And they have like little points, almost like price points. Like they know how often Syracuse is likely to hit that 70-point mark, or previously the 75. They lowered it because they weren't hitting it as much as they wanted to. They want Syracuse to hit that mark at least 2/3 of the time.
Yeah, they want people in the stores.
Well, they want people in the stores. They want people to get excited about it. I mean, if you make it something that doesn't happen very often, then you don't get people excited about it at a game often enough. So I know it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was a interesting story. So thanks for sending me down the rabbit hole, Brent.
You're absolutely welcome. Clear space on that shelf behind you for the Pulitzer, because you deserve it for finding the answer to that question.
I also checked on this, Brent. So neither one of us, we report on the team. We don't cheer for the team. We're not fans in that respect and everything. But I did find out our media credentials are as good as a ticket. The next time Syracuse scores 70 or more, you and me are headed to Taco Bell.
Now we're talking. All right. I mean, come on, let's go. Free taco time. I don't know where that falls in journalistic standards, but I don't care. I'm getting a taco, man. Game on. Let's go.
That's right.
Now, what's interesting about that, Mike, and we'll close on this thought, is I was wondering about the numbers generally and just how that worked. But this year, as you know, the crowds have been very, very small. And look, there's a number of factors for that, right? Obviously, COVID's the number one reason. There's been a couple of games recently that it's been like 0 degrees at tip time. So that makes it a little tougher to trudge up the hill and go.
Yep.
9 o'clock start the other night on a Tuesday night. Not very ideal for people to go up to the Dome. So one way or the other, Mike, the crowds have been a lot smaller this year, and maybe that'll start to improve here. Certainly the Duke game's going to have a jammed house, maybe a couple other games, but I don't know. What's your theory on Outlet? Is it everything we mentioned there, something else just from your experience there, or what's your take on that?
No, I think you hit on a couple of the big reasons. I think one, because of COVID, there's some fans who are staying away out of being concerned. Even if somebody is not really concerned about contracting the virus themselves, or if they've been vaxxed or whatnot, but if they have like a 90-year-old grandmother living with them, or children under a certain age that aren't vaccinated, or, some people are like, you know what, I can't afford to be out of work for 5 days if I test positive. I can't blow this. I can't blow this gig on going to a Syracuse basketball game and get, so I've talked with a few people at SU and also around the ACC. That's the big reason. I think other people aren't going because on the opposite end of the spectrum, they're sick of the protocol. I don't want to wear a mask, blah, blah, blah. From what I'm hearing, that's a smaller number, but still it's part of the whole pie, right? We have to remember, if we're talking about attendance now, whether it's at Syracuse or even around the ACC, and comparing it to another year, you don't have students in the stands for like the last month and a half because they've been on break. And at Syracuse, that student section is usually 3,000 to 4,000 strong. So, we'll have to see where the numbers go at Syracuse here when the students return, which is this weekend. So like the next home game a week from Saturday against Wake Forest, students will be there. And you would think the crowd size will start to look a lot different. And then, to be honest, the product on the floor, both at Syracuse and around the ACC. The ACC's down, Syracuse down relatively, right? And for Syracuse, it's been a trend over the last few years. We've talked about it, their regular season records and barely getting in the tournament. And, it's still great if you make the tournament, and it's great too if you go to the Sweet 16 or a Final Four or whatnot. But, when you have an arena as big as the Carrier Dome, if you're a season ticket person, you don't worry about not getting into a game if you drop your season tickets. You're still going to get in. You can still buy tickets to 2 or 3 games the following year. Other schools that have smaller arenas like Duke doesn't experience a drop off because if a season ticket holder drops their season tickets, they're not getting back in that arena for a decade.
Exactly.
Because it's immediately going to be scooped up. It's like Green Bay Packers with a waiting list, So Syracuse runs into that issue because of the size of the Carrier Dome, the bigness of their arena. People aren't compelled to buy the season tickets. So then you're talking a lot of walk up. That's a lot of work for Syracuse people, for the Syracuse University officials to sell those single game tickets and other packages. But you mentioned the game the other night with that freezing temperatures, the temperatures in the single digits. Well, they didn't have any walk up that night. Who was walking up and getting a ticket for that game? Nobody. And when season tickets are down slightly, well, then that's why you end up where you are attendance wise for the year.
You know what I think, Mike? And I don't know what percentage of the fan base this would cover, but whenever Duke's on the schedule, everybody wants to go to that game. And like you said, not everybody wants season tickets. The Duke ticket was very expensive this year. That's a big, you're even up in the 300s, way away from the court. You're paying 75, 80, 90 bucks a ticket. Syracuse, is trying to cash in on that. I don't blame them for it because there's a big demand for that ticket. So I think a lot of fans made a choice. Like, do I go to that game and be a part of that atmosphere, or get season tickets, or go to more games, or just kind of figure it out as we go? And like, people know, like, hey, there's not a lot of fans going. Like, I can get tickets if I really want to, or I maybe know somebody that's not using their tickets, or so there's a lot of things, almost like a perfect cocktail of reasons why attendance has been down. But we'll see where that goes as we go forward here. The Orange not going to be home a lot in the upcoming schedule here, starting with Duke. 3 of their next 4 are on the road after 3 straight at home where they won 2 out of 3 games. All right, Michael. Well, thank you. Appreciate it as always. You can just take the rest of the year off because you did the Taco Bell story. So your services are no longer needed, my friend.
Thank you very much, Brent. Happy to be of service to you. And let me know the next time you have a good question like that. And by the way, there was a carryover There was questions, at least one question regarding the Taco Bell thing that led today's Mike's mailbox.
Boom. See?
So there was a lot of interest out there. So you're the man. Thanks for the idea.
Glad to hear it, my friend. We'll talk to you next time. See you, Mike. There he goes. The one and only, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Waters, syracuse.com. Got to the bottom of the question we've all been waiting to hear. How many people cash in those Taco Bell free tacos? Read the story to get the answer. I didn't want to give it away, but we got a little bit of the story of how Mike came to the conclusion. All right, so that's hoops. Wanted to note a football thing that happened just today, as a matter of fact, for our friends that are watching on the football page. So Syracuse has added a wide receiver through the transfer portal, as Nate Mink writes here on syracuse.com. CJ Hayes, a grad transfer receiver from Michigan State, has joined the Syracuse football program. He will be here for spring ball in the spring semester, which starts next week. He's been on a campus visit here, posted the news on Twitter. He's the fourth transfer brought in by Syracuse since the end of the season. They lost about 16 players into the portal, have added 4, including now CJ Hayes. He's a 6'2", 205-pound receiver. Doesn't have huge numbers at Michigan State. 14 catches, 154 yards in 19 games. He was hurt in 2020. He actually played on the defensive side of the ball last year for Michigan State. You know, Michigan State had a great season, 11-2, number 9 in the final AP top 25 poll, so we couldn't quite crack the lineup there, but could have an opportunity to play here at Syracuse under new offensive coordinator Robert Anae and a new quarterback coach, Jason Beck, coming in. So just to recap, Dan Villari, remember, quarterback from Michigan, Long Island native, comes in. Running back Jawan Price added to the room, which needs more bodies. I mean, Sean Tucker, who strangely was not listed on Pro Football Focus, their top 10 returning running backs in college football list that was out recently this week. I mean, what are we doing? Are you kidding me? That list is invalid without Sean Tucker. We are not pleased with your performance there. Also, Syracuse added defensive back Braylon Oliver from Louisville. There's a corner from Rutgers, whose name escapes me at the moment, that Syracuse is targeting. He's in the portal, so they're still looking. They're still in there. I'm seeing posts pretty much every day from players still going into the transfer portal. I saw a quarterback from Texas Tech went in today, so Syracuse is still looking. And I think Hayes is going to be an interesting add because, look, they just need bodies in that room. You know, looking at just I've got the numbers in front of me here from last year. Courtney Jackson was Syracuse's leading receiver. 37 catches, 389 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's not a lot, right? It was a run-based offense with Sean Tucker, but you know who Syracuse's second leading receiver was last year? Sean Tucker. 20 catches, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, Damian Alford, who I really liked and emerged, and I think he's going to be a star at some point. You know, Anthony Quealy, Devon Cooper, Sherrod Johnson. Remember, Taj Harris left the team. So bottom line, Syracuse just needs bodies, and they need competition. They need speed, and you need a player who's hungry to prove himself, and I think we're going to see this offense open up again. You got Sean Tucker. You want to use him and utilize him, but, you know, the secret's out now, right? Teams are going to game plan against Syracuse. They know they kind of went to that ground and pound approach, but what Syracuse is to take advantage of what are these wrinkles that Robert Anae and Jason Beck are going to add to Dino Babers' offense and just get some more speed, and whoever ends up winning the quarterback job, if it's Villari, Garrett Schrader, whoever the case may be, they need weapons, right? I'd still like to see Syracuse utilize the tight end position in the passing game. I'll just kind of beat that dead horse a little bit more, and I think maybe we will now that we've seen a fresh approach here from Robert Anae and Beck. But, you know, spring practice, we don't know when it starts. Usually mid to late February they get going on spring practice, but a big addition for Syracuse, and hopefully somebody that can crack that lineup and give whoever wins the quarterback position another weapon to throw to. So that was a football note this week, but they'll keep looking around in the portal, and you never know when a player could be added. We're certainly monitoring that for you. So, of course, stay tuned on syracuse.com for the latest there. And we are on the Lacrosse page, and a lot of you probably saw a notification pop up and like, wow, CNY Lacrosse. I don't even remember liking this page, but it looks, listen, I'm a big lacrosse guy. I'm going to be covering lacrosse a little bit more for syracuse.com this year. I'm just a big fan of the sport as well. I've been growing up in Central New York and played the sport, and this is going to be a significant year for lacrosse. You've got Kayla Trainer taking over the Syracuse women's lacrosse program because Gary Gate, of course, who was running that program and nearly won a national championship last year running that program, is now the coach of the men's team. So a note came out this week just to kind of get you in the lacrosse mood. They don't start until mid-February. February 12th is Syracuse's first game on the men's side against Holy Cross. And then we'll be up and running on the lacrosse side. But just to kind of get your brain going there, 4 Syracuse men's players earned preseason All-American honors just this week. Tucker Dordovic, Brendan Curry, Brett Kennedy, and Owen Hiltz. Now, Dordovic and Curry, 2 veteran star offensive players that Syracuse is going to count on this year to keep that production going. Kennedy is one of the best long stick middies in the country, and not a surprise to see him give an honorable mention, a nod there. Owen Hiltz, to me, is the guy that pops there, because you got to remember what kind of freshman season he had. He was one of the most productive freshmen Syracuse has had in years. 8th most points in program history. There's been a lot of impressive freshmen in Syracuse lacrosse history. 29 goals, 19 assists, 48 points last year. And I'm just thinking about how creative Gary Gate is going to be with this offense, how aggressive he's going to be with this offense. I can hear my dog barking in the background. She's very excited about lacrosse this year. Summit, big lacrosse fan over there. What do you think of Gary Gates' new offense, Summit? And of course, she gets quiet at that moment. But he's going to be aggressive, creative, high scoring, and Hiltz is going to be a big part of that. So I'm curious to see where other players get in, the touch that Gary puts on the offense. Replacing Drake Porter and net is going to be huge. And there's always, players that come and go. But I think this team has a really good mix of experience. We mentioned Kennedy and Dordovic and Curry and some players coming back, but, a youth infusion as well. Owen Hiltz being at the top of that list. So that is on the men's side of things. On the women's side of things, there were 7 players, and I'll pull that up for you so we can give them a shout out here. 7 women's lacrosse players that earned preseason All-American tabs. And look, I'm gonna call it right now, folks. Not to put any added pressure on them, but they have the expectation as it is, coming up just short of winning the national championship last year. Syracuse women's lacrosse is going to win the national championship this year. Calling my shot. This team's going to do it. They're going to get over the hump, and they are going to, if it's a rematch with Boston College, whoever they play, they're taking home the trophy this year. So mark the tape on that one, friends. But 7 players earned preseason All-American honors. Emily Harris-Chuck, who comes back from injury, right? She was granted another year, and she'll be right in the thick of things for the Teworthan Trophy, which goes to the best player in college lacrosse. Megan Tyrell, Sarah Cooper, first-team players there. Sam Swart, who is returning after a very productive season last year, second team. Megan Carney, remember, who was just on a tear last year, putting up a huge amount of points and was going to be in the Teworthan Trophy conversation herself until she tore her ACL. She's back. She's healthy. She's ready to rock. Emma Tyrell and Emma Ward. Emma Ward, to me, what we're talking about with Owen Hiltz, is one of the most exciting young players in the country. Where's the 44? So you got to love that. And I mean, that is just as good of a top to bottom offensive lineup that you are going to get. Sarah Cooper is a defensive player, but some of those other names we mentioned in the country. Now you've got Kayla Trainer back, who's the youngest coach in the ACC, one of the youngest head coaches in the country, but has won national championships as a coach, as an assistant. And I mean, the roster she was handed, the team that she was handed. Now they've got to replace Asa Goldstock in net. That's going to be the big thing. But this team is national championship turnkey operation. And reading all those names and the accolades they had, Megan Tyrell in particular, who you lose Harris-Chuck and Megan Carney, and all Megan Tyrell did is step up and was right on their level as one of the best players in the country. So just wanted to wet the whistle a little bit. Let our lacrosse fans out there know we got you covered. We'll be talking about it as we go through. Busy time here with Syracuse hoops coming down the stretch, and both the men's and the women's team, by the way. Lacrosse starting to fire up. Spring football will be here before you know it. So a lot to talk about here as we go through the month of January and into February here on Orange Weekly. So we'll end it there for today. Appreciate all your great comments from you guys. James jumping in here, talk a little football, and Michael Antonio and Merritt, appreciate you guys and your great comments here throughout. But just a reminder for those of you watching that this show airs live, streams live, if you will, Thursdays at 1 o'clock on our Syracuse Orange Facebook pages. So make sure you're liking the Syracuse Orange basketball Facebook page, football Facebook page, CNY Lacrosse. Give that a like so you can know when we're on live here and when we're doing our post-game shows as well, following Syracuse basketball games. Syracuse Orange Sports on YouTube, where you can find the show live. You can also find the archived YouTube clip. You'll see a post on syracuse.com, which includes the video, and we'll fire it out on our social media channels as well. So if you can't watch the show live, you can always watch the replay in those places. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health for presenting the show. Thanks to you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll hop on Saturday after Syracuse plays Duke, specifically for basketball, and do post-game for that as always. So we'll talk to you then. Until we meet on Saturday about 2 o'clock or so. Thanks for watching Orange Weekly. My name's Brent Dax. Thanks to Mike Waters for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time, friends.